Welcome to another episode of Morning Mojo with me, your host, Shane Solomon. And today we have on the sofa Daniel Marshall, and we're talking everything PR, inspirational, motivational. Daniel, it's a pleasure to have you here in the studio. I know you've got a mind full of knowledge. And of course, this podcast is all about motivating people, inspiring people. And that would come right down to a brand story, because a good brand story is there to kind of inform people, motivate people, inspire them to do business with certain brands. So let's get straight into the content. And that is how, this is broad, I know, to create a brand story.
Yeah, sure. Well, firstly, thank you for having me. It's great to be here. And yeah, brand story, like you said, it's very broad, and it is a real minefield about how you can create that. But I think the first thing to look at is kind of what your products are, who the audience you're trying to target, and why that kind of resonates with them and what you're trying to achieve. Because I think you need to have those kind of values for people to buy into. If you don't have that, and I think there's a real problem with people like overlooking that and things like that. And I think the reason people need the values to buy into is because they need something to believe kind of resonate with them. So if you've got, for example, when we had something with, we did something with Nightor, and it was kind of like the wine, it was like looking who the audience were. We needed to make sure that we created something that people would look at and go, that's what I want to buy, because there's so much competition. So for example, we did lots of highlighting on the team, the people behind the scenes. So the people that made the wine, the people that worked in the vineyards and things like that. So it kind of brought the brand to life. So it's not just a case of looking online, buying wine, things like that. It was kind of like, okay, let's have information from the makers. Let's have information from people that work in the vineyards, the grapes, etc., and different things like that. But there's so many avenues you can look at with it.
Because it's such a busy marketplace now, more so than ever, really, to stand out. You really do, have to put out there what makes you different, that kind of USP. And there's so many things now with sustainability that's important to people.
That's it.
There's so many, brand values that people are looking out for. So brand values. I mean, how does one figure out what their brand values are, and why is that important? Because
of course.
I
think it goes back to kind of what your brand is built on, and I think you need to build it on purpose. So it goes back to what we just said then in terms of like the audience, how it resonates with people, and how your products and brands sit with people. And I think having your values, your purpose, it needs to be something again that people buy into. It's not just a case of buying the product. If you have a brand that kind of people can buy into, that's when you will then get people resonating with it, building a community, and that's when you'll get repeat custom, word of mouth, things like that. So powerful.
I guess if I was to relate it to how I built the Cornwall channel, the kind of idea, the purpose was to help and inspire people who wanted to watch and consume content about Cornwall. So when I started it, it was all about making videos of the local community, things that were going on.
Yeah.
And then I had to kind of realize, how do I monetize that? Because you can't keep making videos and contents totally free.
No.
You've got to have a monetary kind of model to keep it sustainable. So then by offering video production to businesses, but by them engaging with us, it then enabled us to do more community work.
Yeah.
So I'd often say to them that, thank you for doing the business, but what kind of community event do you want to see covered and mentioned? And things like that. So it's about being a bit different, because there's a handful of amazing video producers in Cornwall, no doubt. Yeah. And every year they're churning out the universities more creatives,
That's it, isn't it?
So it was like, well, how do we make that different? How do we make a lasting kind of legacy then for Cornwall, that people watch these videos for years after years when they become history?
That is a golden question.
Well, this is it. So, but what I really need is a good PR man. So here you are sat in front of me. PR, it's one of those things we hear belted about. What is PR in your kind of simple terms?
Okay, so how long you got? I'll keep it short and sweet.
As long as you need, my friend.
Keep it short and sweet. So PR is basically your brand in kind of how it's viewed with the public. So, and how it kind of reaches your customers, your audience. That's the basic term of how it is. That's mainly looking at kind of like editorial, but also looking at things like influence and marketing and things like that. So again, how you reach your audience, essentially, that's what it is.
Because a lot of people listening to this will be starting out on their entrepreneurial journey, and a lot of people get confused, and I did for a while, the difference between marketing, advertising, PR.
Yeah.
And it's very important to get PR right.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I said, it's such a minefield. There's so many different avenues you can look at. There's so many mistakes you can make, simple mistakes. Most experienced PR people will say the same thing, that you can literally make so many mistakes with it. But I think the best thing to look at is kind of what your brand needs at that early stage. If it is, you're looking at kind of just growing your social media, so you look at Instagram, influencer marketing. If you want to reach kind of different local communities, then paid advertising can often be a good route to go down, especially kind of like local magazines, especially in Cornwall. You've got things like Cornwall Life, etc., and things like that. So that's one thing you can look at. But it kind of depends on where you're at as a business in terms of your needs, because like I said, there's so many avenues you can look at.
You've mentioned the word influencer a couple of times. It's one of those words that is synonymous now with the vocabulary of business.
Yeah.
And it seemed to come out of nowhere, really. But it's not all about the numbers, is it? Just
No.
because someone's got a couple of million of followers,
That's it.
sometimes it's better, quality instead of quantity.
That is absolutely it. Yeah, I think there's been a real shift in the last sort of 5 to 6, maybe even 10 years of where influencers are. Because obviously we've seen it, like you said, it's a real buzzword, isn't it? It's grown massively. And it is a really important tool, especially it doesn't matter what stage your business is at, it really is an important tool to kind of harness. And like you said, numbers used to be the really kind of be all and end all, and people got bogged down in that. And they are great, don't get me wrong. There's influencers with huge numbers that can be really beneficial. But I think you really need to look at the content they're producing, their audience, and things like that. And that's why micro influencers have become such a real important tool to utilize, because it doesn't always matter if they've got millions of followers, but if their content they're producing is not what you need and not what they usually produce, it's not going to look authentic. And that's, again, going back to kind of your branding and things like that. People won't buy into it. So yeah, absolutely, you need to look at the right person. Yes, the following is important because you obviously want to reach some nice numbers, but the most important thing is kind of who is their followers, what their engagement is like, and then the content, is it going to be authentic to your brand?
Exactly. And we were talking in the green room before that these influencers would then come into a business, for example, to set about doing their kind of mentions, their reviews, whatever you want to call it. And then the owner of that business will try and influence them too much to change, because they'll say what they think they should be saying for them. But really, just let them get on with it, right?
100%. You're picking someone based on the content they produce. So you need to give them full creative control. Obviously, there needs to be kind of nuggets of information that you need to give them about what your brand is, needs, etc., things like that. So that is important. But you've picked that person for a reason. So you need to kind of give them as much creative control as you possibly can, because that's what their audience will. That's why their audience follows them. It's because of that. So you need to give them the full kind of, the full remit, and give them freedom to do that.
Now, PR is one of those kind of businesses I relate similar to SEO for a point of view of a new business starting out, or even just someone established that looks at it and think, I might not see the return straight away, but it's still important to invest in PR.
Massively. Yeah, massively. It's just, even if you're just planting the seeds, I think, and the thing with looking at PR and looking at strictly editorial, journalists can take a long time to reply to your emails because they get inundated, especially kind of the big top publications. They get really inundated with emails. So you've got to make sure, one, your email stands out, for example, if you're pitching. So it's got to be good subject header. The information has to be kind of short and sweet, but to the point so it's got to be like everything they need in one place. They haven't got to go searching for it and things like that. But it's so important to get that bit right. And like you said, there isn't always a return of investment straight away. It really is. It can be a long wait for things. I mean, sometimes you can get something confirmed and it's out in a year's time or something like that. So it can be a slow burner, but it's important to kind of put yourself on the radar effectively.
I think PR is a bit like reap what you sow. You've got to kind of plant it now for it to then develop.
Absolutely.
Very much like SEO as well. I mean, that's a whole minefield thing altogether. Yeah. But you've got to do the planting now to get the benefits later.
Absolutely. And like I said, it goes back to putting yourself on the radar, and you're putting yourself in those kind of circles. So if you start with that process and get people talking about you, even if they haven't replied to your email, for example, they might still be talking about you in the offices, etc. And again, like you said, you're literally planting that seed, and it's so important to do it, regardless of what stage you're at your business. It's important to, if you're 10 years down the line, you need to keep doing it, because like you said earlier, it's so easy to get left behind with so many different, so much competition now, etc. So yeah, it really is important.
And for me, it's all about, it's just all about the journey. It's, why, and the why.
Yeah,
I think is important. So, for example, for you, why did you start your own PR?
For me personally, I enjoy talking to people and meeting people and networking. So it kind of stems from that. It definitely stems from that. And I think when I got into when I left university and you're in that kind of place where you don't really know what you want to do, etc. Um, I kind of fell into a little bit of local journalism. So I got into that from there. And that's kind of where the love for talking to people, PR, all kind of married up. And then I got into marketing with a local business called Tempest Leisure, who then became GLL. Worked for them for a few years, brilliant local company, worked on some great local initiatives, kind of helping people back into sport, etc. Then I went to work for a company called Unique Homestays, which is a brilliant, brilliant brand. They've got luxury properties across the UK and Ireland. And again, another lovely Cornish company. And that's kind of where it stemmed from there. I was their press officer for just over 4 years and met some brilliant people, worked with some brilliant people. And that's where kind of the love for PR developed from there, and then moved on to Nitor, which is also in Cornwall, winery. Moved more into kind of the food and drink sector side of things rather than property and travel, but kind of it was great for me to kind of broaden my horizon in that sense. So working with different journalists, different publications, and that's where I am now. I kind of set up to go freelance, and just, it comes from a love of talking to people effectively. That's what it comes from.
The people business.
Yeah.
What a business to be in.
Exactly.
So talking about people then, what type of people have inspired you on your journey so far in life?
Yeah, I think the first person, probably get this a lot, is lecturers at university, for example. People like that are kind of industry focused. They've been in the industry, and obviously transferring their skills and teaching the next generation. That's there was people at my university where I studied, and that was brilliant. But in terms of people that have inspired me more recently, giving exact examples, I'd probably say at Unique Homestays, for example. The head of brand, name drop?
Please.
Francesca Reed, who is the head of brand at Unique Homestays. She was brilliant for me in terms of developing just kind of personal skills, career skills, everything in terms of she's brilliant. She kind of brought everything out of me effectively. There's also Hilary Dominy as well, who was the marketing manager. Another great person to work with, and just literally brought everything out of me effectively. And the kind of skills that I have today, I definitely owe them a lot.
What would you say is the number one skill that you've developed that you're finding very useful in your journey?
I'd probably say how to deal with feedback. I would say because
interesting. Okay.
Yeah, because I think it can definitely be misconstrued as criticism. But I think always got to remember that feedback comes from a good place. And the things that specifically those two people taught me was how to deal with feedback and how to harness it, use it, and move forward from somewhere. So, prime example that I've used before is a press release when I was just starting out. Still very much learning how to put together a press release for that business. And it came back with lots of different notes. And I was kind of devastated at that point because I was thinking, maybe this isn't for me. And then you kind of sit down, you realize that this is coming from a good place. This is coming from a place that they want you to learn, they want you to grow, etc. So I think dealing with feedback is the one big thing that specifically those two people have helped me to deal with.
And you're so right. I mean, I've had that on my journey of business where people say certain things and you think, oh, ouch.
Yeah.
And you can take it too personally and really get het up in it. But no, that's a great bit of advice. Favorite books? Anything? Are you a book person as such? I mean, I like audiobooks. My attention to reading is terrible, but
I've got really into reading more in the last couple of years. When you have that New Year's resolution, you think I'm going to read a chapter a day. Doesn't always happen. But I try and read maybe one book a quarter. I try and give myself a bit of a break and don't get too hard on myself. I don't read a chapter a day. But the last two I've read, one's called Contagious, Why Things Catch On by Jonah Berger, which is very interesting about not just about PR, but kind of literally marketing in general and how brands just blow up effectively, how their brands just become amazing. There was one example he used of a restaurant in Soho in New York that had no advertising, no marketing. They literally just it was all word of mouth. So it was like a secret underground kind of restaurant club. And they would get people from all walks of life come in, top tier people would come in, but it was not advertised anywhere, just all through word of mouth. And he said that's just looking at the power of word of mouth and what it has. So that's just one example that he used, and that's in the first chapter of that book. But Contagious, Why Things Catch On by Jonah Berger is a really good one.
Tell you what, talking about that always brings me down to someone like Weatherspoons
Yes.
as a brand, because they don't advertise.
No.
That is a purely word of mouth
Yeah.
business by, stacking it high
Yeah.
and selling it cheap.
Yep.
And I've looked at that business model and it is an absolute machine.
Yeah, it's genius, wasn't it, really, at the time?
Yeah.
It really was. Especially in the cost of living crisis now as well.
Exactly. You can go and work from there and have unlimited coffee refills all day and
Exactly.
not have to pay for rent for beautiful buildings like this. But
exactly.
That is an absolute machine. Okay, great great tip there. So what next then for you? I mean, if you've got a bit of a plan for the next 12 months, I'm not a huge believer in plans like the next 10, 20 years, but, because we never know what's going to happen. But, 12 months is quite achievable.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the 5-year plan I keep to myself.
Okay.
Just because I don't want to tell everyone and not achieve it.
Sure. Yeah.
Then literally the plan for me is to kind of get some more clients, work with the ones I'm working with now, and just kind of establish those relationships effectively. With journalists, with influencers, and like I said, the brands I'm working with, just kind of keep building from there.
And how do you keep your mind sharp? We're in an age now where we're all busy. There's lots going on.
Yeah.
Mental health is, put out there a lot, that we can be under a lot of stress and things. How do you then kind of, keep sharp to make sure that you're performing at your best?
Yeah, I think routine is massive for me, especially since going freelance. Obviously, you don't have the same set hours, so to speak, as you had before. But for me, setting my alarm at the same time every day, going to the gym, literally simple things as clean your teeth at the same sort of time, having your breakfast, and then you're ready to work. I have to be disciplined in that to keep myself motivated and going. But I think setting your alarm, regardless of your hours, is so important. Even if you're not working another 4 or 5 hours, setting your alarm every day at the same sort of time and having a routine is, for me, that's instrumental.
Routine is a great thing. I try and stick to that as much as I can. And through the week, I tend to get up at a certain time. But then, of course, at the weekend, I can't lie in anymore because I'm on that routine so much. I'm like, I just want to chill. And my mind gets so busy because I'm thinking, I've got to do this and I've got to do that. And I could do this and I could do that. Just coming back to PR for 1 minute to kind of wrap this podcast up. So what one thing can our listener and viewer do today that could set them on their PR journey, would you say?
I think the best thing they can do is have a conversation with someone that knows the industry well. Not necessarily, don't have to pay for PR, invest in PR, but I think having a conversation or even just doing a little bit of research about kind of what it is and how it can help, I think is really important. And again, it doesn't matter what stage you're at your business, because you could be 10 years in and not ever really have looked at PR before. You could just be looking at your basic social medias, your SEO, things like that, which are obviously very important. But PR will complement those things as well. So I think the best thing they can do is just do a little research about what it is and how it can help their business, I think is the best thing to do. And if they then want to invest, then they can go down that route.
Well, I would suggest they grab a coffee with you sometime. And,
please do.
Certainly if they're here in Cornwall. But I guess you could work with people outside the county as well.
Yeah.
We've got the wonders of technology now.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, Zoom was huge during COVID, wasn't it? It seems to have lingered around. So, yeah, absolutely. We can, if there is anyone looking for PR, always happy to have that conversation.
And now, this is the final one. This is the closing moments, the words from Daniel Marshall of, inspiring and motivating our listeners and our viewers. This is the chance. If there's anything that you could just part on our audience for their success for the future, what would it be? It could be something you've already mentioned, but just to sum it up.
Sure. So I think a quote that always sticks with me, I'm not usually big on quotes, but a quote that's always stuck with me is by Oscar Wilde. And it's, be yourself because everyone else is taken. And I think that resonates well with business and brand. You need to make sure your brand is a reflection of you and who you are, because that's what people buy into.
I like that. That's a good one. And I haven't heard that one before.
There you go.
Yeah, I like that. Well, there you go. That is another episode of Morning Mojo with me, your host, Shane Solomon. Today's guest has been Daniel Marshall, the PR guru, I'm going to call. It's the first time we've actually met. I've really enjoyed our time. Has it been okay for you?
Brilliant. Yeah, thank you very much for having me. It's been absolutely fantastic.
Well, don't be a stranger. You're local to us anyway. If you're ever passing our studios, just drive on by.
Amazing.
No, I won't say that. No. Come on, you're always welcome. You're always welcome. As always, I'd like to say thank you to Megan and today to Josh for producing this podcast. As always, share it, like it, love it, subscribe, hit that notification bell. And if you know of anyone doing anything amazing, please get in touch with us here on the Morning Mojo. But until the next episode, I will see you soon. For myself and Daniel,